Welcome to this episode of Ask the Guitar Coach. Here's your question for the day. What's your opinion on 7 and 8 string guitars? Well, that's actually a very good question, a question that I was considering like several years ago when I was doing my heavy practicing, if I should practice more and get a 7 string or an 8 string. At the time we didn't have too many 8 strings. So I will try to give you my opinion. Once again, let me say that I'm not an expert on 7 string guitar playing. I use them every now and then on recordings, but my main instrument is so far and probably will always be a 6 string. Having said that, let's get started. So here's my trusted 8 string. I have a couple of 7 strings as well, but I decided to use this one for this video. So that is gonna cover the basis for both instruments, both for the 7 string and for the 8 string. Now, the biggest difference when you're playing a 7 string or an 8 string guitar is bending and vibrato. While usually when we're playing a 6 string guitar, we can put our thumb over the neck to do a proper bend or proper vibrato, here, due to the width of the fretboard, it becomes very difficult. It's still doable if you have like really large hands, and if you're only like bending or doing vibrato on the first 2 strings, it can happen, but it's definitely not optimal. So what ends up happening in this case is we end up like doing the vibrato like this. And the bends are a little bit less optimum without having the added strength of the thumb here, which help you use the, as we've said in a previous video, the power of the bicep and the supination, this movement, to create the bend. If this all sounds over your head and it sounds complicated, please check the video that we have on my channel about vibrato. I will put the link down below. So, vibrato and bending, 2 of the most important techniques of the electric guitar, become significantly more different. The second thing that becomes more difficult because of the 7th or even more with the 8th string is muting, and this is for 2 reasons. First of all, the more strings you have to mute, the more difficult it is to mute them, because even if you're doing the most advanced muting technique, which is using the thumb for the lower strings and the rest of the fingers for the higher strings, you still only have like 4 points of muting. So if you have a 6 string guitar and you can mute 4 strings, one is the string that is being played, so you only need to mute 5 strings. It's easy to mute 4 out of 5 without too much trouble. However, as the strings become 7 and 8, it becomes way more challenging. That's one reason why muting is more challenging. The second one is that it's actually more difficult to mute the strings as they become like bigger, as they become the 7th and the 8th string, as they become more bass strings, because you need to really stop them, like really put your fingers on them to stop them from ringing, because of the size of the strings, it's very easy for them to ring sympathetically and create noise. So muting becomes way more difficult. Okay, again, not undoable, but just way more challenging. That's another difficulty of the 7 string guitar, and the 8 string guitar even more, that you should take into account. So many people ask me what happens with the chord shapes and the scale shapes, and if they're more difficult, more easy, anything in between. Truth is, scales are not significantly more difficult. They're pretty much the same, just one more string is added, and it's nothing really that would make you choose to start playing the 7th string guitar or stop from playing the 7th string guitar because of the difficulty in scales. Chords, on the other hand, they become more easy, because now you have more places you can play your roots and your inversions, so it's actually easier to get some good, musically better to use a 7 or 8 string guitar. The main reason, however, to use a 7 or an 8 string guitar would be the specific style you're playing. If you don't need it for the specific style you're playing, you probably should not use it, because it does make things a little bit more difficult, as we said. So what are those styles? Well, I would say gent and any kind of combination or similar sub-style to this quite new sound, you would use a 7 or 8 string guitar. Then progressive metal, In several cases, it becomes much more interesting and more intricate with the use of 7 or 8 strings. And finally, if you play jazz music, chord melody becomes much more intricate and interesting if you use a 7 or an 8 string guitar, like George Van Epps did from like several decades ago. If you're playing one of those substyles, in those cases, then yes, by all means experiment with a 7 or 8 string, and even if you see that works for you, you can make it your main instrument. One thing that I have seen, and this is a personal observation, is that 7 string guitars tend to have a slightly better sound when recorded. Maybe it's because of the extra mass on the body, maybe it's because most of them do not have like tremolo bars that tend to thin out the sound of the string. But I have seen that in several cases I have recorded the same theme, the same melody with a 7 string guitar and a 6 string guitar, and it usually will be recorded better, it will sound better when it's recorded with a 7 string, even in several cases where the 6 string is a more expensive instrument. So there you have it, 7 string, 8 string and 6 string guitars. This is what I think about them. I hope this was helpful and maybe even enlightening in some aspects. Thanks for tuning in, keep those questions coming, don't forget that, and I will see you on the next episode of Ask the Guitar Coach.